Hey everybody, John Skiba here from the Consumer Warrior YouTube channel, and I'm also the founder of the Arizona Consumer Law Group. I do bankruptcy law in the state of Arizona, and on today's video, I'm going to steal a page or a prompt from ChatGPT and go over the top 10 concerns that people express when considering a Chapter 7 bankruptcy or any bankruptcy filing for that matter. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for over 22 years here in the state of Arizona, and ChatGPT generally got it right. The concerns that I see and the anxiety and the fears that people express over filing a bankruptcy, really, from what I've heard, from my experience in doing this for so long, is really lines up with ChatGPT says. So we're gonna plow through this, and we're gonna go over the top 10 reasons or things that people express as far as causing a lot of anxiety about filing a bankruptcy. The first one, and I agree with this overall, ChatGPT says that it is impact on credit score. How is the bankruptcy, whether it's Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, how is that going to impact my credit score overall? Like I said, I hear this all the time. In most situations, I can tell you, most people that contact me, the debt issue has become a problem for a long time. It isn't something that's just happened all of a sudden. People have been missing payments, house payments, car payments, all that kind of stuff. And so really the initial impact has already been done. The damage to the credit score, it's down significantly just due to those missed payments. And in fact, the filing of the bankruptcy kind of stops the bleeding a bit and will actually start the recovery process as far as your credit score goes. However, there is a surprising number of people that call me and they have a ton of credit card debt, but the writing's on the wall. They're not going to be able to continue to make the monthly payments. They're in a really bad situation. And so what I tell most people is when you file bankruptcy, you're generally going to see about 100 to 150 point drop in your credit score. And, the higher your score is, the more it's going to drop. And so you can expect, if you're at 700, you're probably going to drop to like a 550, something like that. Surprisingly though, if you are lower than, if you're down in the 500s or even 400s, you're going to see it hit, but maybe not a whole lot, maybe 30 to 50 points, that kind of thing. Now, what most people are surprised by is how quickly you generally recover. This is particularly true with a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you're able to, the case is filed, there's that initial hit, your case is discharged about 4 to 5 months later. And then after the case is discharged, that's really when the score starts to improve. And you could, it is not unusual for people to get a home loan, a mortgage loan, normal interest rates, 2 years after a Chapter 7 discharge has been entered, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is completed. So, the credit score actually comes up pretty quickly, and that's because on your credit score, the accounts, while they're still there, they're zeroed out. So it's not showing you as having this overwhelming debt issue. I mean, you do have the notation of the bankruptcy in the public record section on your credit report, but in large effect, you do recover pretty quickly. Car loans, credit cards, as soon as the bankruptcy is over, you're almost eligible immediately to start getting those. The interest rates will just get better the further you get away from it. It's important to remember that bankruptcy is just one point in time. It's different than like a credit card. A credit card, they're reporting every 30 days that you're late. There's a new negative information being put on your credit report. Bankruptcy is just one date. That day that you file it, the further you get away from that, the better off you're going to be. So that's the number one concern, is impact on credit score. It's a valid concern, but most people recover much more quickly than they initially anticipate. Now, the second biggest concern is loss of assets. And this is particularly a concern in the Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you don't lose anything. You're able to keep all assets. The trade-off is you've got to make a payment to your creditors for a 3 to 5 year period. So I'm not going to touch on Chapter 13. Chapter 7, though, you can lose assets. I mean, the big picture of a Chapter 7 is you're going to eliminate all of your credit card debt, medical bills, personal loans, those kinds of things go away completely. However, the trade-off is the bankruptcy court, using a bankruptcy trustee, they're going to review all of your assets and determine if anything is not exempt. There's all these exemption laws, both federal and state. Like here in Arizona where I practice, there's Arizona exemptions, things that, like the homestead exemption, vehicles, retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, household belongings, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a concern that you're going to lose it in a Chapter 7 if it's not exempt. I can tell you that's largely unfounded, particularly here in Arizona. The exemptions do vary state to state, but I can tell you in the state of Arizona, roughly 95% plus of people that file Chapter 7 bankruptcy don't lose a thing. So that's something, like I said, I do a free consult here in Arizona. I'm happy to go over it and let you know if there's going to be an issue. But in general, most people can keep their stuff, and losing assets in a Chapter 7 is not a big concern. All right, the third one is fear of public stigma. As far as, a lot of people say, is everybody going to know that I filed this bankruptcy case? The answer to that is no. I mean, your creditors will know. We're going to have to send notice to all of your creditors, but are your friends and your neighbors going to know? I always say not unless you tell them. I mean, it's a public proceeding. If someone were to go down to the bankruptcy court and say, hey, has John Skiba filed a Chapter 7 case? Yeah, you'd be able to pull it up on the court's docket. But I can tell you, it's not online anywhere. There's not a list of people that have filed. The federal court system uses something called PACER, where you can actually download documents and search for cases. But typically, it's attorneys who use that. You have to have an account to use it. They charge you for the pages you're using. So other than your creditors and the people you tell, generally no. No one else is going to know. So that's just between you, your bankruptcy attorney, and your creditors. And that's really about it. All right. The fourth concern is the cost of filing bankruptcy, including things like attorney's fees, court costs, all that kind of stuff. I can tell you that that's obviously a legitimate concern. Bankruptcy fees are, I guess I want to say less than what you say, particularly for an attorney, where I see what people pay, to litigate cases or divorces. You hear about a divorce case and people are spending $10, $20, $30, $50,000 in attorney's fees. Bankruptcy is nothing like that. First of all, the bankruptcy court oversees the bankruptcy fees and what attorneys charge. And if there's something that's totally out of whack, they can, they'll bring the attorneys in to kind of figure that out. I can tell you the Chapter 7 case, particularly in Arizona, this varies from state to state. We don't really charge anything up front other than the court's filing fee. So I'm recording this in 2025. The court's filing fee for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is $338. And then we do a payment plan on the rest. And we do it over 12 months. So I can tell you that we try to make it really affordable and manageable. The payment plan thing, not all states allow that. Arizona does allow it for certain conditions. So we work with clients. It doesn't cost anything up front. We just send them a representation agreement. We start preparing it. When we file it, that fee has to be paid, the $338. And then a month later, we start a 12-month payment plan. So it can be very affordable to do a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, particularly here, particularly with me in the state of Arizona. And we try to make that as low stress as possible. We know that money is a big stressor. Debt is a stressor. We're trying to alleviate that, not add to that. And so we make it a much simpler process. I can tell you too, when you think of attorney's fees and court costs, let's say that you had $50,000 of credit card debt, and I told you that for $3,000 you could make it all go away. You'd jump at the chance. And so in a Chapter 7 where you're not making payments to your creditors, the attorney's fees and court costs are minimal compared to anything you would be paying through debt settlement or any other type of thing. And like I said, we try to do it in a payment plan to make that work for you. So, all right, number 5 is future credit opportunities. And I kind of touched on this as it relates to the credit score. People are shocked. My clients are shocked because when we file their case, within a month, their mailbox is full of credit card advertisements and car loan advertisements. Now, when it comes to the credit cards, the reason why they are willing to give you a new credit card, even though you just filed bankruptcy, I always say it's a little bit perverse just because from the credit card company's view, it's a situation where, okay, you filed bankruptcy. However, one, they're assuming you're going to have more disposable income because you've gotten rid of all this debt, that you're going to have more disposable income to be able to pay any charges that you make on that card. And two, you can't file a new Chapter 7 bankruptcy and receive a discharge for 8 years from the time that you're filing this current one. So in a weird way, they kind of got you. If you don't make these payments, you can't file bankruptcy, and they're going to try to collect on it. So the interest rates are not going to be great, obviously, particularly as you're just finishing up your bankruptcy. But it's something where generally, if there is a credit card needed, you'll likely be able to qualify. The same is true with a car loan. Car loans are not risky loans for lenders. They're secured. There's collateral, the vehicle that they can take if you don't sell, or if you don't, that they can sell if you don't make payments on it. And again, you're going to get better interest rates the further you get away from your filing date. Mortgage loans, FHA loans, loans through the VA, those can be obtained at normal interest rates 2 years after a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is completed. Other lenders are 3, some 4 years. But right around that 2 to 3 year mark, you should be able to get back into a mortgage loan if that's something that you're looking for. All right, the sixth one is emotional stress, as far as the emotional stress of going through the bankruptcy process. Now, some cases are more stressful than others, to be sure. I can tell you the typical Chapter 7, the biggest stressor is that it's just a little tedious. The typical bankruptcy filing is about a 100-page document that we put together with information on income and assets and your budget and your creditors, certain financial transactions. So I kind of warn clients up front, hey, we're going to need a lot of information. And so you're going to have to work with us so that we can draft these documents accurately. So as far as the overall stress, I can tell you that the number one thing people tell me once their bankruptcy case is completed is, I should have done that years ago. That I needlessly stressed about, the debt, staying up at night, how am I going to make these payments, worrying about wage garnishment, lawsuits, and all that goes with debt issues. They say, hey, that was relatively stress-free, and I should have just done it a long time ago. So while there can be, particularly if you have a complicated case, there's things that do add to the stress. If you're a business owner or you have significant assets, that can add to it. But in general, the most people are surprised at how little stress is involved in the overall process. All right, number 7 is the complexity of the bankruptcy process. I can tell you in general, and again, talking Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the process, other than gathering all the information, is relatively, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but it kind of moves along a, conveyor belt type law, we'll call it. There's a lot of information that we receive. And my job as the attorney is to be able to go sift through all that information, make sure that we're protecting assets, that there's not going to be any problems with certain transactions or payments that have been made. But once we get those documents filed, the general process for Chapter 7 is the documents get filed with the court. The court enters an order that stops all collections. 4 to 6 weeks later, there's what's called the meeting of the creditors, or the 341 meeting. It's a meeting with a bankruptcy trustee. It's something we get our clients fully ready for, but it's literally usually a 5-minute thing where they put you under oath, ask you if what you submitted to the court is accurate, and then they'll determine if there's any assets that they can liquidate for the benefit of your creditors. Something now is that 341 meeting is actually done via Zoom nationwide through the United States Trustee's Office. It's a Zoom meeting. It's literally about a 5-minute deal, not anything to lose sleep over. And then about 60 to 90 days later, the bankruptcy court will enter your discharge, and that'll really end the case. So as far as the complexity, Chapter 13 is going to be a little more complex. Chapter 7 is going to be fairly straightforward. Like I said, it's 4 to 5 months. Case is filed, you're done, and you're moving on as far as recovering and trying to get that credit score back up. All right, the number 8 thing was the long-term financial impact. Truthfully, for most people, the long-term impact is a positive one. I often see people with $20, $30, $40, $50, $100,000 of credit card debt. They're either making the monthly payments on it and not making any progress, or alternatively, they are, they're unable to make those payments, and they're finding themselves in a situation that's just spiraling out of control. And so not only that, if you're just keeping those monthly minimums made, it can be years and decades without making any true progress on it. Long term, if the debt is overwhelming, if you're not able to make those monthly minimums, or that's all you're able to make, you're going to recover much more quickly, and your financial health and financial impact is going to be much better overall if you just get the Chapter 7 done, tear off the Band-Aid, and get it over with. At least from what I've seen over the last 20 plus years of doing this, that's how most people, as far as getting through it and their ability to long-term recover. All right, number 9 is employment implications. A lot of people, and I get this a lot in the consultations I do here in Arizona, if they file bankruptcy, are they going to lose their job, or is their employer going to find out? Now, the Bankruptcy Code specifically has a provision that states that an employer, whether it's private or government, cannot fire you solely because you filed for bankruptcy. Now, there are some little asterisks to this and a little nuance to this, because the areas where I have seen a bankruptcy filing become problematic are generally if you work in 2 areas: the financial industries, if you are, let's say, a banker, or you're dealing with other people's money routinely, or if you work for the government and you have some type of security clearance. I have seen this with Border Patrol officers, FBI agents, and those types of jobs. Now, I can tell you, typically, if they have the job and they file it, that's not a big deal. It does make it sometimes more difficult if you're going through the application process, say for the Border Patrol, or like I said, the FBI. I've had both of those situations, and there was a concern that it impacted. I always tell people, if you have a real concern, it's best to talk to your HR department. But in general, I can tell you, again, I've met with tens of thousands of people over the last 22 years. file thousands of bankruptcies, it doesn't impact employment. Your employer is not notified unless there's like an active wage garnishment that we have to notify them, so that'll stop. But in general, it's not going to cause any issue. All right, the number 10 thing is, are there alternatives to bankruptcy? And of course, and I surprisingly, again, to most people, I do go over non-bankruptcy alternatives because bankruptcy is not a perfect fit for everybody. Now, the non-alternatives that people generally look at are things like debt consolidation loans, or they go out and take a loan, maybe like a home equity line, consolidate all that. I usually do not recommend that. I don't recommend taking an unsecured debt, like a credit card where there's no property attached to it, and converting it into a secured debt, like a HELOC or a home equity line of credit, where then your house is collateral for that loan. The reason why I don't recommend that is because if you don't pay your credit cards, they will damage your credit score. It's possible they can sue you down the road, and you may have to deal with it at some point like that. But they can't really take anything from you in the short term. However, if you take all your credit card debt and turn it into a HELOC, it then becomes a secured debt against your house. And then if you can't make the payment on the HELOC, you're going to lose your house. They're going to start the foreclosure process. So I don't usually recommend that. There's also these debt, they call them consolidation or debt settlement companies. Those tend to work for people who have relatively few creditors and relatively low amounts of debt, under $20,000. What I often see happen when people go in with large amounts of debt, or if they have 10, 15 creditors, is that while they may be able to negotiate some of it, they often cannot negotiate all of it. And then it ends up in a situation where they settle 2 of the accounts, but then 8 of them sue you and you end up filing for bankruptcy anyway. So, those are the kinds of things other than just kind of Dave Ramsey. I am a big Dave Ramsey proponent. I think he does a great job and that program works really well. And I've referred many people to Dave Ramsey rather than filing for bankruptcy. But at the end of the day, I leave it up to the client that you have got to be the one to decide and look at your current situation. Can you pay these debts back? Can you realistically do it within 36 months? If it's something where you've already been paying the monthly minimums for 5 years, 10 years, or if you're facing wage garnishment, bank levy, lawsuits, maybe it's time to deal with the bankruptcy and just get it done with altogether. So hopefully that gives you some information if you're going through the bankruptcy process. Again, if you're in the state of Arizona, my information is below. Set up a consultation. I'm happy to talk with you and really discuss kind of the pros and cons of the whole process and whether it's a good fit for you. Thanks for watching today.